Polls. Man alive, you hear about them all the time, right? Especially in this business. You do TV or radio, or you're a politician, or you're obsessed with it like you are. We all are, let's be honest. Because you're always looking at the polling data. How are we going to do? Tell me who's going to win. But all these freaking people lie. And it's not that every poll is a lie, but man, lots of them are. They're Democrat run, they're push polls designed to do certain things. So it's hard to make any sense of what you see. But one of the best out there, I've noticed this consistently. All the people I trust go to this guy. He's known as the People's Pundit. His name is Rich Baris, director of the Big Data Poll. All right, Rich, let's focus on polling here for a second, because I like knowing things I don't know. If you're some Democrat polling firm or some Democrat pays for it, how can you manipulate a poll? People don't even understand how these things are done. How can someone even do that?
I think, and I was listening to the intro. First of all, thanks for having me, Jesse. It's good to be here. But I think what is going on now is you really have two problems with polls. One is a methodology problem. Different people, different groups of people respond to different modes of collection, whether you're doing it by phone, online. And if you're doing it by phone, are you using IVR, calling landlines? Are you calling cells? Are you texting? They respond to these modes at different rates. And I think what we're really seeing now, which moves into part of an ethical problem, is that there's plenty of evidence that what they're doing is wrong, why it's wrong, why they create response biases and social biases. They just don't care. They just don't care. And I think that's because it favors their narrative.
Okay, expand on response biases. How do you do something like that?
This is perfect, actually. We're just coming out of the summer now. We just, moving into the Labor Day weekend. It is well known in this industry that in the summer and before Labor Day, it's a reason why that's really the threshold or the mark, that people move to likely voter models, even though we do them before. That's because people really aren't paying attention, especially more conservative and working class people. They're living their lives, Jesse. They're not sitting in front of the computer or the telephone, just dying to tell a pollster during a 20 to 25 minute interview over the phone, how they're going to vote and why. Everyone is different. I think that's part of it, is what makes us liberals and conservatives. We have differences in our behavior, and everybody knows that there are response biases, meaning they don't want to participate, that favor Democrats, because Democrats are more willing to take surveys in general. So now that we're moving past Labor Day, you're going to see these polls tighten. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. See, I'm learning. Okay. What do people care about? I know I'm in my own bubble, Rich. I sit down, I do this every single day. I follow who I want to follow on social media. I know I've created a bubble for myself, and I have blinders on. What do people actually care about? I guarantee the list is different than my list.
Yeah, we all do, right? And part of a pollster's job, too, is to make sure that the bubble that you're living in is not influencing your work. So if you're a pollster at the New York Times, you live in a cubicle and you know nothing about the rest of the country, flyover country. Maybe even, if we're being honest, you resent them a little bit. So it's hard for you to discern what they care about. And the modern, the narrative right now, the current narrative, is that abortion is really thrown a wrench in Republicans, plans here. And that's not really what we found. Abortion right now is tied for number 3, right 9%, along with immigration and border security. Half of the country, Jesse, really tells us that their vote is based on economic issues. Cost of living and inflation, that's number 1, a little over 30%. In the last poll we just did, came out a couple of days ago. Number 2 was jobs in the economy, just about a little under 20%. So number 3 and 4 are kind of distant. This is an economic election. It is.
Okay, it's when we say that's what voters care about. It's one thing for me to care about something. It's another thing for me to assign blame to this guy or think this guy has some sort of solution. Are they there yet, or am I way too inside baseball and they're just mad they're paying too much for chicken and gas?
No, I think when it comes to inflation, and it's interesting over the last year when people really started to tell us about inflation, food and groceries, we just got out of the summer and everyone was talking about gas prices, but food and groceries was number 1 long before gas prices started to rise. People were complaining about that. And it's been about a year since we started asking people, well, who do you trust more to handle it? Or just crossing, your most important issue with your vote. And out of the top 4 issues, if I include abortion in there with immigration, out of the top 4 issues, Republicans have an advantage on 3 out of the 4. So economy and inflation issues, they trust Republicans more, and they will vote if that's their number 1 issue. They will vote Republican. Immigration, not even close. They trust Republicans. On abortion, Democrats have the edge. So out of the top 3 or 4, they have assigned blame, and they're ready to render a judgment on that.
Rich, explain what they don't care about as far as somebody like me or some crazy communist activist, what they think. Like for me, I care about the administrative state. I think that's a big deal. I care about America's drug addiction problem. I'm very concerned about China and things like that. For them, they're probably worried if the dogs in the country are gay enough. But I know voters in general don't care about that stuff. What do we activists care about that the voters just don't?
Yeah, on the left, I mean, I would say that, the LGBT issues, transgender participation in sports, from school to the Olympics, voters, that is not a priority for them. In fact, they can't stand it. A lot of the environmental issues, they now associate that closely with just the climate change agenda. And that seems to be a big priority for the Democratic Party and their activists. But the voter themselves really don't care. Republicans, I think they care a lot more about election integrity than the overall voter does, even though, of course, they'll tell you they think it's important. It's not a priority for them to vote on this year. And there are numerous other, I would say, you just said the administrative state. For independence and overall the general population, voting population, they're not really there yet. Although I think from what we saw in the polling, in the post-raid on Mar-a-Lago period, I do think there is some concern there. Last time we asked, less than 20%, Jesse, said they had a great deal of confidence in the FBI to do the right thing and not be corrupt. So that's been bubbling underneath the surface, but certainly, activists on the right care about that more than the rest of the population does. They could make it an issue. They just haven't.
All right. I guess it depends on who you talk to. We keep hearing about this thing called a generic ballot and what it shows, what it doesn't show for the midterms. Are Republicans going to sweep all the Democrats out of the House? Is it going to be disappointing? What do you see happening, Rich? I know it's probably still early, but what do you see happening as far as what we should expect for the midterms?
It was important to get that pre-Labor Day benchmark, which we did in that poll we just released a couple of days ago. It did show a narrowing on the generic ballot, but it wasn't mind-changing. Democrats have been really stuck in our polling at like 39 to 41%. Republicans have ranged from anywhere between 42 to about 47, as high as 48%. So it has very clearly showed that Republicans have a structural advantage here going into November. But it narrowed because some of the right-leaning vote, working class vote, moved over to undecided, I'm not sure. Or maybe some of them fell out of the voter screen altogether, which is when we decide who is at this point most likely to vote. That could change, though. That really could. So overall, Democrats in our polling have not led on the generic ballot at all in a single poll this entire year. So while it tightened, it's hard for me to dismiss the fact that they've led, Republicans have led for every survey we've done over the last 13 surveys. Look, a lot of this is getting overblown too. A 2-3 point national vote win in the House vote, Jesse, for Republicans is a big deal. We see some of these Republican plus 5 or more generic ballots over the last 6 months, and people were, kind of losing focus or losing perspective that if Republicans carry the popular vote by 3 points to 5 points, it's a blowout. They picked up 15 seats in 2020 when they lost it by 3 points. So just to give people a little bit of perspective. And districting, I would say, it was either a wash or slightly favored Republicans by a seat or two. So that's the environment we're in.